What up, East Coast, West Coast, North, South, worldwide YouTube family, Sickle Cell Warriors family. Welcome to another episode of Our Sickle Life. My name is Ulyss, and today I have a special guest with me, Heather. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Good. It's been a busy day, a lot of information at the Sickle Cell Community Consortium. So can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and your relationship with Sickle Cell?
Well, my name is Heather Avant, and I was born with sickle cell. I was diagnosed while in utero. My brother was diagnosed at age 1, so they decided to do a amniocentesis on my mother, and they found out I had sickle cell at that point. So I've known before birth.
Okay.
Yes, and my brother and I's symptoms are very different. I was hospitalized a lot more often. He wasn't hospitalized quite as much. And because of that, I kind of became my own little advocate at around age 6, where I was in the first newspaper article in our area talking about sickle cell, and then of course, science projects, science fair projects, and papers and photography, using photography. I'm a photographer.
Okay. Nice.
To tell my story, and that turned into writing medical journals and participating in medical journals with colleagues and friends, and just really getting out there and telling my story through my images of photography, and telling my sickle cell warrior story.
Actually, you kind of mentioned that earlier, you said your symptoms and your brother's symptoms are a bit different. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Well, from my understanding, first children tend to have lesser symptoms most of the time. I don't think that that's like a general rule, but first children tend to have, they experience lesser symptoms. My symptoms, I was just hospitalized more. I experienced more pain crisis more frequently, whereas he may have been hospitalized once every 2-3 years. I was hospitalized 3-4 times a year, especially as a child.
How would you describe your crisis? How is it like?
Where
does it start?
Crisis start, I can get them wherever. Usually, once I have a crisis in one area of my body, I will have them again in that same area. But if I've never had a crisis there, I tend to never get a crisis there. But I can get them anywhere. I get them in my hips, mostly my joints, my hips, my knees, my shoulders, my elbows, my back, my lower back, upper back. I think everyone's familiar with that if you're a sickle cell warrior, and your chest.
For me, it's my legs and my lower back. Those are like my trigger points. So
my main joints are my trigger points. It wasn't until a few years back that I actually got a sickle cell crisis in my neck. But that's because I was with a fever while I was in the hospital. And I was asleep. I was out of it. I was completely out of it. And the nurse put ice packs on my neck to bring down my fever. Of course, doing that triggered a crisis in my neck. And so now I get them in my neck.
Okay. Wow. So, like you were saying, your triggers could be anywhere. Do you find that when you compare yourself to your brother, for lack of better terms, do you get jealous the fact that he doesn't get sick as often, or his crisis is less than yours, or is his crisis look differently than yours? How would you describe that?
Well, I've never been jealous of him because our journeys are different. I think maybe as a child, when I was little, jealousy kind of reigned true. But I think now as an adult and, now I'm not jealous because we're just two different people with two separate lives. But
okay, maybe jealousy might be the wrong term, but in a sense of I had there was 4 siblings, out of my family, 4 out of 5 children had sickle cell disease, and they all look different. And I'm the one that had it the worst out of everybody else. Although, I have a younger brother and an older sister that passed away from sickle cell. So for me, when I was comparing myself to my younger brother, he used to do things I couldn't do, and I'm like, that's not fair. But I would still try to do it. So it was, in a sense, he'll be the person that pushed me to do more. Because I'm saying, I'm the older brother, I should be able to do what he can do. So it'll push me to do more. That's what I mean by, it's maybe jealousy is not the right term, but it's I wish,
competition. and the desire to do what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yes, I did have that desire, and I did push myself to do a lot of things that he was doing. I think, and vice versa. I mean, as an adult, I'm more of an advocate than he is because I feel like I experienced sickle cell more than he did. You know, he didn't experience a lot at all in his teenage years. You know, he had very little crisis, very few painful episodes, where I, you know, was in the hospital every couple of months. So for me, I guess it pushed me to pursue being more of an advocate. And then now he's jumping on that and he's like, oh, I can advocate too. As he's gotten older, has experienced more sickle cell crisis, and I've experienced lots. So the roles have kind of switched and flip-flopped. So it just depends on the timing of our lives, I think, where we are. And so right now, he's joining in advocacy. You know, he's now speaking to medical students, and I started that when I was really young. So I think that, you know, we kind of go off of each other. It's like this little perfect round sphere.
I guess like sibling rivalry.
Two sides of a coin, right?
I see. One question I wanted to ask, and I think maybe our viewers would like to ask that same question, is like, for you, like, you know, because your parents knew that you had sickle cell before you were born, was that ever like a topic of conversation when they talk about whether or not, like, you know, your parents have that guilt of bringing you to this world and to have you suffer and all that stuff? Like, you know, for my mom, like, you know, she used to say, like, you know, I was like you know, Jesus had a cross and hammer a cross that she had to bear, because although she had other children that had sickle cell, but I'm the one that was like sick all the time. So for her, she used to call me, like, you know, hammer a cross. I don't know how you can
I understand, you know, that completely.
Visualize what she meant.
I understand that completely.
For, like, you know, for, like, I know a lot of sickle cell warriors out there, and their parents always have that guilt, you know, into bringing them in this world. Like, if you're suffering, it's my fault. Was that ever a conversation?
My mom never had that. She never put that on us in regards to making us, because I think my mom was always wise in that way of never making us carry her cross for her and putting her cross on us. But my dad was more of this is my fault. This is why you have this. This is my fault. I did this. But I think also a big part of that goes back to our parents' generation and not having the education that we have today. Understanding genetics and how that works, and understanding how you pass this along. So, you know, for me, like, I know that if I would have had his first child with sickle cell, I would have wanted to study up on it and learn everything. My parents, though, that's not how their generation was. They were kind of like, we'll just deal with it as we go. And they had a second child with it. And for me, I guarantee you, if I would have had a first child with it, I'm certainly not going to have a second child with it. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that the second child doesn't have sickle cell. So I think it's generational. It's where we are with information. It's more readily available. I remember when I was little, when I first started advocating for sickle cell, there was no information out there, absolutely none. And I remember being so like just frustrated, because there was, like, you know, when the internet first started up. And I'm sure you remember when, you know, you had to dial into AOL and the sound and all of and all of the sounds. And the first time going online and searching and putting in the search bar sickle cell and coming up with, like, a few things, you know, and to find someone who was like you was like almost impossible. So because I feel like our parents, my mom, you know, I remember learning about sickle cell, she would tell me, go look at the encyclopedia, you know. I think those exist anymore. But, you know, that was my source for education, or, you know, or going to my hematologist. And at the time, my hematologist wasn't even a specialist in sickle cell. He was a hematologist overall. So I learned to educate myself as I got older, because I wanted to know my life expectancy, what I was looking for, what the future held for me, because my parents honestly didn't have a lot of answers. And so they never put their burdens on me, but they didn't, I don't think that it's because they were undereducated.
For you, as an example, like, you know, was, life expectancy with sickle cell, was that ever like a struggle or an issue for you? I'll give you an example. Like, you know, when I was growing up, like, you know, they tell my parents, like, you know, I wouldn't live to see 4, 10, 16, 18. The last frontier was 30. I'm 43 now, so it's like, I passed that. But I literally thought that I was going to die at 30. I did really die, and I came back. But that experience made me understand that nobody can put like an expiry date on me except God. So, and then when you're about to die, God always gives you the choice whether you want to live or die. So it's a choice that you have to make, and going through that process made me understand that. And I'm not afraid of dying anymore. But when I was younger, I was afraid of dying, and I wanted to do everything fast. So it's like I did it fast. I do everything in my life. I did it fast because I was always like in that rush. Like yeah, you know. And it's like how do you call that? A race against the clock. Like, you know what I mean? Because like, you know, at one point like it's gonna end, and I'm like, I want to do everything I can. It's like if you told me like I cannot do something, I would do it because, well, the worst thing that can happen, I'll get sick. But at least I would have done it, and then I'll know what it is, and I put that in my bucket list. I've done this, I've done that. Mm-hmm. So I was always rushing to do things like that. So I don't know if you were given like a life sentence yourself, but was that ever an issue for you?
I was never given a life expectancy. Okay. I think my mom kept that pretty well at bay. Okay. I think she was a really big advocate for that not happening because she didn't want us looking at life and saying, I'm going to die here, and then expecting it and waiting for it. So she made sure that never happened. I'm pretty sure that there were doctors out there who were more than willing to tell me how long I was going to live. I remember my oncologist and I having a conversation like this when I was around 18. He said, well, do you want to know, based on your signs, symptoms, and where you are in your life, what your life expectancy is? And I was like, absolutely not. Because what I'm going to strive to do, and what I've gotten better at in my 30s, is living every day like this may be the last, being prepared for it and understanding it. And I think having acute chest syndrome and almost dying has kind of helped me to understand you can die tomorrow, and you have no control over it. Exactly. So what do you do today? And if you do die, are you happy with who you are? Are you pleased with where you are? And, you know, can you meet God and He say, job well done? And that's how I try to live my life, in kindness, in education and learning, and I just try to be a good person because I want to look back on me and be like, I was happy with who I was, you know? Faults. You know, I have my faults, don't get me wrong, but I just want to make sure I've done a good job. And then I've also done things. I never want to sit in my bed and saying all the things I wish I would have done. Although, I'm sure, as you know, and a lot of sickle cell warriors know, when you're facing death, you don't think about all the things you didn't do. That's nothing that enters your head. Usually it's people you love.
Yeah, true. Yeah, definitely. Last question was... Oops.
Did I delete it?
I hope not. No, we didn't. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I know you have children, right?
I do have one little boy.
One child, right?
He's 2.
So, did you ever have any concern about having children?
Yes.
Having sickle cell?
I absolutely had concern. It's a great question. People don't ask that of me often. I had a lot of concern and a lot of thought went into having him. A lot of thought with my doctors, a lot of thought with my pastors, and a lot of thought with my family. Because I understood that he could potentially be the end of me. I mean, I can die. But the thing is, realistically, anyone can die giving birth. But, you know, I understood this was a high risk. I'm taking a big risk. So I did a lot of thought, prayer, and speaking with people who I loved. And everyone thought I should go ahead and give it a try, including my doctors. They were like, go give it a try. So I decided to give God a year to get me pregnant. And 2 weeks before the end of the year was up, I found out I was pregnant. And I thought, well, at least he had a sense of humor. Because my husband and I were planning a trip to New Zealand. We were like, no baby, let's go on a trip. But we got pregnant, and I had a very rough pregnancy. It was very hard, and it was very frustrating for me. My pregnancy was very, very difficult. And I decided not to do it again because I want to be here to see my baby boy grow up. And I had one child. You know, I feel like I've served God in that way and put one child out there.
But you also know that every pregnancy is different. You know, also know that every pregnancy is different. So that doesn't mean because your first pregnancy was hard that the second one will be hard.
Well, a lot of the complications I had in my first pregnancy aren't going to go away because of my second. Because I had acute chest syndrome so many times, and because I have had 5 pulmonary embolisms, my lungs can no longer handle having a baby. I was on oxygen for the entire pregnancy, and I had pneumonia 3 times while I was pregnant and once while I was having him. So because of those factors, my lungs are a little too damaged to do it again. So I won't be able to do it again. I could, it would just be very, very detrimental.
This is a question from all the women out there, all the sickle cell warriors, women out there. Would you ever consider, having like a surrogacy or somebody to carry your child or things of that nature? Was there ever something that you talked about or you thought of, or
we did
adoption?
Think of it.
Like, what were
we
the
thought of
options?
adoptions. We thought of adoptions and we thought of surrogacy. Unfortunately, financially, that's not in our wheelhouse right now. And as I age closer and closer to 40, it's becoming more of an unreality, because I have realized that taking care of one little boy is like, going to war every day. It's a lot. It requires quite a bit of energy. It requires you to invest a lot of bit of energy. And because I've gotten older and because my body can't take as much, I'm a little more tired. And right now, having another child at this age, it's a little too hard on me and where I am. Now, someone else, if you're 30 years old and you're feeling great and you want to adapt or have a surrogate, go for it, kill it. You had a rough first pregnancy and are kind of scared about the first one. I completely go for it. If your doctor's just saying, hey, my doctor told me I have to have another one. I just don't want to do that to myself. But I've been cleared to go ahead and have more. I just, unfortunately, for me personally, I don't want any more.
No, but the reason I asked that question is like, for people out there for me as an example, growing up, there's a good chance that I might not be able to have kids for different reasons, like side effects of medication and all kind of stuff. So being in a relationship, those were conversations that came up, would I consider adopting? Would I consider having surrogacy? Would I consider so many different options? Back then, I don't think those options was as readily available that they are now. So it's just basically to make people understand that not because you have sickle cell, that doesn't mean that your life ends there and you cannot have children, etc. There's always other options.
There are tons of other options, and as long as they're in your wheelhouse, I say go for it. I mean, I always tease my husband, had he married me a few years earlier, we may be in a position to have adopted, because I would be younger and be like, let's do this, because adoption is a long process. But right now, where I am and being a little bit older and, having that, it's just like, I want to be able to give a child everything. And I don't want to say, oh, well, I can't give you it all because I'm too tired, So we're there.
Well, that's, at the end of the day, it's part of the disease, right? So we have to be able to have that understanding. And also, the children, they are resilient, so they will always understand that piece. Even if they don't understand it at the time, they will always understand at one point. So it's not something that we should feel guilty about.
Yes.
You also mentioned that you're married, you have a husband. I wanted to ask for all the single people out there, being in a relationship and dating. How was that for you? Being in a situation where you have sickle cell and you're dating somebody that don't have sickle cell, that don't know what sickle cell is. How did you approach it, and what would be the advice that you would give people out there that would like to think about those situations?
Well, when I met my husband, I was in a really good space mentally. I was single, but I was happily single, and I think that means I was. To me, and I think I didn't realize it at the time, because I think it's always retrospect. I was, I was in a good headspace. I was okay with being alone. I was okay if I never got married again. Or I was 28. I was like, I don't need to meet a guy. And it wasn't so much I don't need a man. It was I'm happy with what I have in my life right now. I'm happy with where God has me. I'm happy with how my life is going. And I can see myself, if I don't get married, being okay with that. And I have a lot of friends who say that same thing, and it takes them years and years and years to find a spouse because it's not really fulfilled in their heart. And literally within 3 weeks of of saying that, my husband met me at a wedding in California. And, you know, it was the funniest thing. He saw me across the way. I was totally not interested. And a couple days later after the wedding, he called me and we talked. We were long distance. We did long distance for 4 years. And telling him I had sickle cell in the beginning was, it was nerve-wracking. I think that's nerve-wracking conversation for anyone, but I waited about, I want to say, it was in 3 weeks or 3 months. I think it was about 3 months. I waited quite a...
Yeah, 3 months.
I waited quite a time to tell him because I wanted him to get to know me first without this overlying issue. I wanted him to understand, and I know that he was saying, tell him the first day, but I feel like there's a difference. There's a stigma, and they're like, oh, well, you're sick, so they immediately write you off. I didn't ask him how old he was for the first few months because I knew that if he told me that he was younger than me, I would have wrote him off. Like, nope, sorry, can't do that, you're too young. So I didn't tell him for quite a while, and when I finally did, he was very kind and gracious, talked to me about it, asked a few questions, and I spoke to him the next day, and he told me, you know, all I want to do is take care of you. That was his response, and I was like, oh gosh, you know, winner, winner, chicken dinner. I have this amazing man who wants to, you know, be with me, who wants to take care of me. And I think that that's what anyone with sickle cell really needs, is you need someone who's willing to step up and say, okay, I'm going to put you on the toilet and help you wipe. Because, I mean, you know, short stick of it is that those are things that sometimes happen for us.
Yeah, that's well said. I cannot add more. Okay, I don't know if you can address that question, but if sickle cell wasn't predominantly like a black people disease, do you think that sickle cell would be the care for sickle cell or the awareness about sickle cell would be different?
Yes.
And why?
I hugely believe that sickle cell, because it's not, I call it a minority disease. I don't call it a black disease because we're not black people.
No, I agree. It's not a black disease, but that this is
if it wasn't a minority
disease. This is the narrative and also like the stigma across sickle cell. It's a red blood cell disorder. It's not about race.
It has nothing to do with race, and you're correct. I believe that if it wasn't a minority disease, that it would be treated way differently. I believe that if black folks weren't the only people walking into hospitals all the time, they would treat us much better, because at that point it's like we're not complaining. Remember the opioid epidemic when it first started? And they talked about how the opioid epidemic is this epidemic, and I remember doing research, and I found out that the opioid epidemic was started by mostly middle-aged white women. And so back in those days when it was first beginning and first starting, and they would say, well, you're a seeker, when I would go into the emergency room, tell them very smartly, well, I'm not a middle-aged white woman. So that's the demographic you're looking for in regards to a seeker. I'm a 17-year-old kid who needs pain medication. And usually with that, I would get like drop jaws because I feel like you didn't just say that. But I did, because it was true. At the time, that was the demographic that was seeking out pain medicine. It wasn't me. It wasn't the 17-year-old black kid, you know. So there is a very, very ugly stigma attached to being black with this disease. You walk into the emergency room, and I mean, people have looked at me and said, well, she's white. I walk into an emergency room, and no one has ever said she's white. They don't see a white woman, they see a black woman walking in here with sickle cell. So if we were all colors and mostly white, guarantee you, it'd be treated like cancer. It'd be treated like if we went to the hospital and we were in insulin shock from diabetes. It'd be treated if we had CF, cystic fibrosis. I mean, because those diseases are taken seriously because they're not a minority disease. So when you have a disease,
but even when you look at CF as in cystic fibrosis, the data, especially for Canada, it's almost identical to sickle cell.
Really?
And they get more money in terms of funding. They get awareness about cystic fibrosis. I was like 10 years old and I was seeing ads about cystic fibrosis at the time. And and they have like I don't remember the numbers, but the numbers will be like something like, let's say $50 million in terms of funding that they get and research and all that. And sickle cell disease maybe like
100,000.
50,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like it's night and day. But it's always those questions like I like to ask people to see like if the perspective is different from one person to the next.
Yes, I agree. And I have, I remember when I was moving here from Michigan to Texas, and I remember they built a new hospital, children's hospital in Michigan. And at the time, they had a hematology floor. But on the hematology floor, there was only CF patients. And I was like, so sickle cell patients go where? And they said, well, to general admin.
Okay.
And I was like so put off by that. I'm like, so CF patients get their own floor and their own wing, and hematology patients don't even get a half of a floor? Like, how does that function? How does that work? You just put them in, throw them in with everyone else. But realistically, they need to be treated by a specialized team. We need to be treated by a team of nurses who understand sickle cell and understand, like, you can't wait an extra hour over our time, prescribed time for our medication, that we actually need it on those moments, because the thing is, we're depending on it because the pain kicked in an hour before that. And now you're making me wait 2 hours, and now instead of going forward with my pain, I'm going backward because you're not. So I feel like that, and when you have consistent nurses, you have consistent understanding, and the education is consistent, so they understand how to treat you. So yeah, if sickle cell was like CF, we'd have tons of money, tons of funding, and also, one organization that holds us all together. With sickle cell, there's a million tiny organizations, and it's so hard to find solid information because there's not one major group. Like breast cancer has season glaucoma, but sickle cell doesn't have. There's a Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, but that's not all encompassing either.
I was going to say, like, even if you look at cancer, they have like different levels of different organization for cancer. There's different type of cancer. There's different type of sickle cell. There's thalassemia and all that stuff. So it's like, I think sickle cell is so complex that it's kind of hard for one organization to cover everything. And I think there's a space for different organizations to be on that same sphere, on that same level. But it's almost like the crab in the barrel type of mentality where they try to treat us like that, in that sense, where because there's so many of us in terms of organization, they kind of like make us fight each other to get like one piece of the pie, where we could have, if we could have get together as one and get the entire pie, it would be better than having like one piece of the pie.
Yes.
Right. So unfortunately, hopefully we can get there, and we strive for that. My last question for you would be, what are in terms of advancement, where would you like to see sickle cell in the next 5 to 10 years? What would you like to see for sickle cell patients in the next 5 to 10 years?
Everyone speaks, of the cure. I would love to see more therapies for us. I don't necessarily need a cure so much as a therapy. I want therapies that help us, raise our hemoglobin levels so that we are on level with everyone else all the time without the side effects, without crazy hair loss and crazy liver damage and crazy kidney damage, and and then also I would like to see us be treated as people, not as diseases and drug seekers, but as actual people. Like when I walk into a medical facility and I tell them I have sickle cell, to not see the faces go, but to be like, oh, okay, great, let's get you in, let's get you taken back, let's follow your protocol, let's get you treated, let's get you in and out.